Today we conclude the semi-final of the Airthings Masters. Going into today, Timur Ajabov has a 1-0 lead against Daniel Dubov, and Levon Aranyan has a 1-0 lead against Maxime Vacher-Lagrave. I'm going to take you through all of the games of the day, the results, and preview the final. And before we do that, I just want to wish you all a very, very happy new year. Let's continue to enjoy chess content together, learning and having a good time on the 64 squares. Let's go! We're going to kick things off with Levon versus MVL, and when you have MVL playing with the black pieces, there is a very high chance that you are going to get a Grunfeld defense. All right, knight f6, g6, d5. There's many ways to play against this, but Levon goes bishop to g5, and knight to e4, jumping in immediately, bishop sliding back. Why does white do this? White does this because, in many ways, this forces black to make an early decision with the king's knight, and now you see that it's gone, and black has a little bit less defense of the king. Sometimes white can launch an attack. In the game, we get bishop g7, Levon stabilizes his center, develops. Now queen a5, very common idea in the Grunfeld is to play this queen out to a5 to pressure the pawn on c3, which oftentimes can be weak. Queen d2, natural defending move. Now knight d7, and maybe Levon wants to, maybe MVL wants to bring the knight in because he lost his other knight. Take, and c4. You say, why would you go for a position like this? No queens on the board. This is boring. I don't want to watch this. Let's not forget that Levon is up in the match. He does not need to pressure MVL. It's actually up to MVL to decide whether he's going to play a certain position for a win. Knight goes to b6. Bishop slides back. Bishop is out. Rook comes to c1. So now, why did he move this rook and not this rook? I don't know, maybe he felt like he had a4, a5 in the future. He doesn't want to decide where to move the rook. And this rook isn't going to be playing on the king side. Now, bishop e4, now a funny move. Bishop slides back to c7 to try to take the knight, and then maybe get the rook in here to hit all the pawns. We get e6, that's exactly what Levon does. Then he plays king to e2. Never too late to play the bomb cloud move, even if it is on move 19. Bishop c6, g3. Very solid position. You'll notice that I always say this in my videos. 5 dark squared pawns for Levon to counteract the dark squared bishop. Slides back. Now this is MVL's attempt at trying to break in the center. This pawn move, let me get a little stuff going. Got my bishops open. They're hunting b5. I'm playing this move to take away the square from your knight, taking a little bit of space on the queen side. Rook d6. Not quite sure what I want to do yet with the rook. Maybe I'm going to double up on the d file. And now Levon says f3. I'm trying to get something to e4. That's exactly what I'm trying to do. And I actually don't even care if I double my pawns. I get doubled isolated pawns, but look, I can even give you one back. Take this pawn, dude. Go. And it's actually not worth it because he's going to get this, and who exactly is going to protect all these pawns, right? So MVL plays rook c6, but not to look at this. This is maybe the fanciest move of the game, rook to f6, and you can't really take it because, again, this problem. So this game was I mean, Levon did a whole lot of nothing. He's trying to get to this kind of endgame. Rook, king bishop 4 versus king bishop 4. Most important thing here is the opposite colored bishops. There is literally no chance anyone loses this game, and so here on move 41, it was agreed to a draw. Now, I promise the rest of this recap video will not be this boring, but, such is life, and I would love to make games a little bit more entertaining if I could, so let's go to Daniel Dubov versus Timur Ajabov. This one will not disappoint. This began with, standard. The Queen's Gambit declined with the move g4. Yes, of course. Everyone's favorite move. Looks like a mouse slip. Looks like here Daniel Dubov meant to play g3, bishop g2. No, he meant to play the move g4, and this is bait. Let's not forget, Daniil has to win in his match, so he's trying to get Timur to take. The point of this is to win the open file here with the rook, and it's actually not really so clear if sacrificing this pawn is so bad. For example, if knight goes back to f6, rook takes g7, I would argue here that white is significantly better than black, because your king is a lot weaker with my rook here in its presence. So Timur says, look, man, I don't care. I'm going to castle. Yeah, g5, knight e4. Listen, I grew up in New York City. When some crazy person is yelling on the street, what do? You ignore them, right? So Dubov here playing this g4, g5 stuff. What does Timur do? If you're being attacked belligerently on the side of the board with this g5 thing, what do? You have to strike back in the center. And he does exactly that, damaging Dubov's structure, playing a normal positional game, and Dubov keeps chugging away with h4. Knight c6, h5, d takes c4. Why? Because, okay, all of this is great. You can come and attack me. Who's your most powerful piece? It's the queen. What happens if I trade your queen, right? I would love a queen trade. So Dubov says, no, queen c2, all right? e5, why push a pawn in the center? Now my bishop is activated, right? One pawn move opens the door for the bishop. Okay, now we get rook b1. This move is designed to prevent the bishop from moving because b7 would fall. So Timur plays bishop back to b6, right? Blocking. Continues on knight h4, and now this is probably one of the nicest moves of the game from Timur. Very principled, very nice pawn move. Again, joining forces with this pawn, f5. The point is that now you have more space and central control. You block out the queen. They cannot take this because it's protected 2 times. There is en passant here, which is exactly what Dubov does, but in many ways, this just helps activate Timur's pieces. And okay, we have to play e3, but the bishop is just blocked. So bishop e6, bishop to e4, and Timur plays queen h6, defending the h7 pawn. This was a threat, so he protects it. Bishop a3 attacking the rook on the diagonal. Rook slides up 1 square. Timur played this game, in one word, responsibly. He is not allowing Dubov to get wild, to get weird. He's holding him down. He's like, come on, hit me with your best shot. Bishop d5 takes, and now knight g5. The point here is Dubov hits h7, but more importantly, he has some ideas to go to e4, and we get queen f5. Now, this is a really funny move. So in this position, if you play the move first of all, this attacks the rook. But if you play this, it looks like a fork. I mean, it just looks like you're winning. But you've opened the door of this bishop. And, speaking of which, the queen can come down. So the point is that for now, you fork me, but in reality, you're just getting obliterated. I mean, I can even move back. If you take the rook, I'm taking this. My queen and my rook are hunting you down. They're gonna take the knight. You're not actually winning any material. But it turns out that queen f5 is a blunder, and here Dubov could have played the beautiful move, rook takes b6. The point of this move is removing the bishop from hitting the f2 pawn. So now after a b6, I just go e4. And now I am winning material, and now Rajabov is losing. However, Rajabov here, instead of taking back, goes rook to d7. The point of which is to go check and invade. So for example, e4, there is check, you can sacrifice the queen, but now there is queen takes f2 with a trifecta fork over here. Hits the queen, both the rooks and the pawn. All right? And this is just game over. You just can't defend this position. So there's all sorts of crazy tactics here after rook takes b6. Actually, after rook fd7, the best move is rook b2 to defend the whole second rank and the f2 pawn. But this didn't happen. Dubov played rook c1. He played a very passive move, avoiding this. And I guess here he must have thought his position was already bad. And Timur just took over. Look at this move. Rook e3. If you take, the queen gets in, I mean, it's just game over. Queen f1 here, and it's mate. You just king d2 and king e1, and rook comes down. So right here, Rajabov now goes for simplification mode. He's completely beating Dubov. So what does he do? He gets this to an endgame where he is up a few pawns. It's 5 pawns versus 3. It took him a while to convert this. To Dubov's credit, he did create a lot of tricky chances. But it was rook knight and 4 versus rook knight and 2. There is just one fun moment a little bit later in the game where right here, Timur could have won with a really, really stylish move. He could have, essentially, the thing is that white is trying to stop this pawn. And in the game, Timur played g5. You cannot take because the pawn escapes. But he could have played knight e5, which is a big gangster move, because you take away the 2 squares, 3 squares for my king to get closer. You cannot take the knight, because now you are not in the square, right? If you don't know what the square is, king and pawn endgame video, please. And now the threat is, for example, if I push, now the threat is g5, and that's it. So knight e5 would have been a little bit of a fancier way, but he does it anyway by bringing his knight and this, and, you know, the knight and the pawns, and it's game over. On move 63, after black's 63rd move, actually white's 64th move, in true chess fashion, Dubov resigns, and Rajabov has a commanding lead now on this match. He's up 1-0 in the mini-match, and he's up 1-0 today. So we will move now to the second round between MVL and Levon. That is where we will start. This was a very long game. It was once again this Berlin with knight e4, and then bishop c6, the knight jumps out to f5, and a queen trade. And, well, what to say? I mean, they've played this throughout this match. white and black can both set up in a million different ways. I will say this. Multiple times already, we have seen black advance the kingside pawns and the rook come up from h6. The Berlin has super non-standard developing patterns. That's just with the infusion of engines and thousands of grandmaster games. Again, we see e6, opening up this bishop to take the c7 pawn. We saw this in yesterday's game. And okay, I mean, what to say about this position? Both sides have equal material, 2 rooks, 2 pieces, and 6 pawns. White maybe is a touch better, because white has 2 pawn clusters, 3 and 3 on king and queen side, whereas black has this pawn on e6 that could be a potential target, given that white has such good control. And if white plays b3 and c4, white will trap this bishop. Which is exactly why, you know, MVL plays b3, and it's also why Levon plays c5 and hits the knight, frees up a square for his bishop, okay? Knight goes out to b5, and Levon says, look, man, you can come in. I'm good, dude. So what? So what? King f7, and, okay, so what? It's a whole lot of yelling about nothing. And, okay, you hit my bishop. Okay, so what? By the way, remember how you got your knight trapped in yesterday's recap video that Gothamchess showed? Yeah, well, you're gonna get it trapped again. I mean, if it stays here too long. Levon watches my videos, obviously. So, what happened in this game? Some pieces were traded. The G-pawn came in. This match really was a slow one. I mean, again, I'm shuffling through these moves because the reality of the situation is it only got interesting here. Why did it get interesting? Because Berlin's, by rule, only get interesting around move 30-35. Why is this interesting? Well, this is a rook and bishop endgame with equal material. However, in endgames, despite material, the second most important thing is the activity of your pieces and your weaknesses. And in general, here, Levon has 2 weaknesses. How are those weaknesses? Well, they're isolated pawns. Right? They're pawns that can just stand there and, you know, the other person has to scramble to defend them. And MVL's pieces are also far more active. You say, well, Levy, these pieces are active too, but they're not creating any danger. Whereas my rook is constantly creating danger, potentially. My bishop is pressuring, my king is pressuring. I don't really have a weakness unless this happens, and we will see if that happens. Right? So rook h7, rook c7. Uh-oh. Who's gonna guard? Okay, bishop has to come back. I'm gonna slide my rook back over. Fake the repetition once. Rook to c8, king g7, rook d8, rook e8. Every move that MVL is making, he's putting some serious pressure. Look at this. Finally, we get bishop to c2. Danger levels. Get a pawn, lose a pawn. b4 takes, now bishop takes. Pawn is out of danger, and we're up a pawn. So now MVL is up a pawn, which is good, because his material is better, and he has what's called a pawn majority. He's putting some pressure here. Bishop c6, f3. Time to start mobilizing. Get the rook out of the way. Bishop comes back. Bishop comes back. But look at this. Aronian's defense has been unbelievable. He's sacrificing a pawn, is what that is. That is a pawn sacrifice. You cannot take back. But this sacrifice blocks the rook from defending the other pawn. Now Levon would play rook c5 and win this pawn. Levon finding such brilliant creative resources on defense. There's nothing you can do. You can push this pawn to reactivate this, but then I win this. The more pawns I trade, the higher chance I'm going to draw this endgame. So he finds this e4 move, and then we get f4, e3, and look at this once again, sacrificing the pawn. Rook goes all the way to a5. How do you defend this? If you go bishop c1, rook c5, it's the same situation. So he finds a way to throw this e-pawn into the wheels of MVL, right? And now that's it. He's only a pawn down, but where is the extra pawn in positions like this? That's how you have to think about it. Where's the extra pawn? Here? Because it's AC versus BC, like AB? Okay, but this pawn's stuck. It's never moving. And look at this b5, right on cue, winning another pawn, or, I mean, threatening to win another pawn because obviously there is this, but it doesn't matter. Even with the trade, that's it. MVL is going to struggle to make progress. He plays king f4. He's going to lose this pawn, and the game simply ends in a draw. Levon has been unbeatable. I mean, look, the art of defense is so overlooked in chess. I know it's like, oh my god, another grandmaster draw, but you can't deny brilliant defending skills, right? Like, it's like in football. If a match ends 1-0, but a goalkeeper saves 25 shots, first of all, that means the defense was horrible, by the way. It just means the goalkeeper was outstanding, right? Any Lev Yashin fans watching? But It's 1-1 in this match, and we will move to the second game between Radjabov and Dubov. Dubov down 1-0, and down 1-0 today goes for a double fianchetto. This is quite a unique way of playing, but we did see MVL do this against Levon yesterday. And then he jumps his knight into the middle and trades it and plays the move c5. The point of c5 is that if you take, my bishop comes down to b2, and actually the rook is trapped. Cruel fate. The rook is just straight up trapped on b2. Okay, well, like, you know, look at this. Queen d2, and now bishop to h6. If you are playing against the King's Indian, if you are playing against any setup like a Peert's defense with a bishop on g7, look to make a battery with your queen and your bishop and go to h6. Because what does this do? This removes a very important piece in Black's position. Black has invested their worth in that bishop on g7 to control the diagonal, and by removing it, the king now is a little bit isolated and doesn't have as much defense. I mean, Timur is playing this game. I would show all beginners this game. Not saying he's playing like a beginner. I'm saying he's playing like an expert. He's developing all his pieces. His rooks both come to the middle. And now what? Well, now it's really going to, and again, he trades the bishops. It's really going to be up to Dubov to prove that he has something in this position because he's very close to getting eliminated. So queen g5, queen h6 is now sneaking in. Rook c8, knight comes back to f3. Why? Because we want to go here. It's not made, but it's annoying. Right? It's close enough. King goes to g8, b3. Timur doing a whole lot of nothing. You know, knight g5, queen to d8, knight f3. Let's repeat moves, Daniel. No, I don't, you know, I don't know if I want to. Okay, my queen's coming forward now to e4, king f1. It's hard to make these kind of shuffling moves sound interesting, right? But then Dubov got a little impatient. So Dubov played e5. The point of this move is that Timur can take en passant, which is what he did in the game. And basically, well, now he's got a target, right? He waited and waited and waited and used Dubov's playing style against him. And now he has targets. He's attacking this, he's attacking this, he's attacking this. The rook is going to come to the open file. Queen d7, knight g5, let's put some pressure. And Daniil here plays the move d5, opening up the position. So the point is that after this trade, you can't quite take the rook. You also cannot go, look at this. Imagine you're like, wait, the knight is guarding the rook. I can go check here, here. I'm so smart. I just want a piece. It's exactly like Gothamchess taught me in his videos. Except you get mated. That's mate. Congratulations. I did not teach you to hang mate in one. You have to look for your opponent's checks. And you can look for yourself. But can the opponent check me? Yes. So in the game we get king g1. A calm move, stopping queen h1 from happening, and now we are ready for the tactics. But so is Dubov. Dubov begins attacking here on the queen side. You cannot go for this so easily, because there is also a knight hanging. Let's not forget that. What can my opponent not just check, what can my opponent also capture? Right? So, yeah, okay, we have to deal with this. And this looks a little bit annoying, but knight to e4, nice move. Knight c3 possible, knight to f6 check is possible. Knight to f6 check, huge threat, by the way, because knight takes, now we will get this rook. So we get rook b7, rook takes c4. Oops. The pawn is hanging, because if queen takes c4, look for checks. Knight f6. If knight takes, I'm not taking this guy. My queen can go that way. Who's over there? That's game over. I mean, it's going to take some time, but it's game over. So rook takes c4, and that's simply it. I mean, after rook takes c4, we got a little bit of counterplay from Dubov. Queen and rook came in. He played this I mean, again, it wouldn't be a Dubov game if he didn't go h5. Rook f3, but Timur just gave his king a hug. And look at this. Look what could happen here. Check, and the king could run out. Timur is going to try to win this game in style, running his king out to the side of the board, getting some fresh air as the house is on fire, jumping off the balcony into a big pillow. Right? Rook g3, and that's it. All these really aggressive moves, and the final one with all this aggression, the rooks, the queen surrounding the king. It turns out that after all this time, boop, and it's Dubov's king. Right? It's Dubov's king that's weak. Who guards the knight? You can give me a check, I just take with the queen. You could go here. You could take like this, attacking me, and guess what? I just take. You can't take me because of this. And if you take the rook, with the logic that, you know, if you take back, you're not wrong. First of all, I'm also attacking your queen with my knight, but I'm going to hunt you down. Check, you know, check here, and mate. It's mate. It's mate. And after that, Daniil resigned. Daniil resigned, and Daniil lost his last 4 games to Timur Rajabov. Think about that. Rajabov eliminates Daniel Dubov and beat him 4 straight games. Isn't that crazy? He beat him the last 2 games yesterday and the first 2 games today. Dubov said in an interview that he actually didn't really think much about winning the tournament anymore once he had defeated Magnus, which to me was fascinating. He basically was saying that to him it meant more to beat Magnus than to win the whole tournament. Well, I have a funny clip for you, by the way. The clip here, this was Timur at the end of his interview and what he had to say after winning.
Good luck in the final starting tomorrow. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much. Thank you. And also thanks to Magnus Carlsen, who just, lost in the quarterfinals, celebrated calmly with all of his family, and we're working hard.
So Timur, I love him. I mean, I love these interviews. I love players who chat after their games and, you know, thanking Magnus Carlsen for just eliminating himself. Timur, keep being awesome. So congratulations to Timur. He is the first finalist, and now the 3rd game between Levon and MVL. Remember MVL's situation, my friends. The reason, by the way, that Daniil is eliminated is because he mathematically cannot make a comeback. Even if he scores the match 2-2 today, he lost yesterday. So right now, MVL's situation is it's 1-1. He needs to win and then draw. So he has to get 2.5 today to force a blitz playoff. Let's see if he can do it. It is another Grunfeld. It is the same line as we had in the first game, but this time C5. Remember, in the first game, MVL played C6. So now MVL is fighting a little bit more aggressively, but still the queens get traded. And MVL's logic was, I'm just going to hold this game, okay? I'm just going to hold this game. Well, I mean, I'm just going to tell you guys right now, this game was 113 moves. This is the 15th move right now. So I am going to move a little bit faster. I'm going to take you through kind of the different phases of the game. First things first, Levon took. That's actually the position you kind of saw in the clip. There's doubled A pawns, and now Levon is going to mobilize here with his rook and pick up a pawn, and we get rook B8. And Maxime sacrificed the pawn here, or I don't know, maybe he just, and you know, he just sacrificed, maybe he lost the pawn, but I'm saying he's sacrificing the pawn to activate his rook and do some damage to Levon's position. But Levon, again, the whole strategy today has been put his opponent to sleep. First of all, by playing very solid chess, and second of all, because, well, his opponent can be eliminated. Now, this is a nice move. Just a very instructive moment. You want your knight to get into the opponent's position, right? Yeah. Well, who's covering all that? The f6 pawn, right? Yeah. So how do you deal with the f6 pawn? You play e5, right? Yeah. You can also play g4 and g5 to try to get to the e5 square. So this kind of concept of undermining a pawn, offering it to be traded to remove control of a square that you'd like. And so, I mean, he didn't have to take, but he did. Plays very passive defense here. And Levon spent this endgame basically trying to pry away MVL's pieces from the defense of each other. And so we got knight to g4, attacking the pawn on h6, moving it. Like, again, you see how everything Levon does is forcing MVL to make moves. Knight e5, and who's ever stopping this? So bishop c1 check, and now g5. MVL says, this is my best way. Now look at this move, f4. If you take, there is knight to g6. So the bishop has to go back and g3. Again, you've got a light squared bishop complemented with dark squared pawns. This endgame is just losing. This is a terrible trade because we've seen opposite colored bishop endgames be drawn. They're much more draw prone. This is much better for white. This pawn is going to fall. Not to mention that white is up 4 versus 3, which means that if the game ends up king and pawns versus king and pawns, white, of course, has the winning advantage. And in the rest of the endgame is essentially just a shuffling war. I will take you through one big moment here. MVL trades off his weak h-pawn. The more pawns MVL trades, the better, but he shouldn't be losing pawns. And now he is down 2 pawns. Why is he down 2 pawns? Because when you have pawns on A and H, do you notice that? If I go back a few moves, A and H pawns, it is so much harder to defend pawns that are on opposite sides of the board, right? So if you have a bishop to defend and attack, so useful. The problem is the other bishop can't really do the same, and this bishop is just unable to defend the a5 pawn, and that a5 pawn's been there for a while. So now in a 2-pawn up endgame, how does Levon win this? How do you win an endgame where you're up 2 pawns? Simplify the right way, right? Trade the knight for the bishop, but do not end up in an opposite colored bishop endgame. So for example, this trade is not really recommended. because you're going to get dark squared bishop versus light squared bishop. It's a lot harder to win endgames like that at times. You need to make the right kind of trade, and oftentimes you need to push your pawns, right? So there was no pawn move. If you watch, there was no pawn move in this game. There was a lot of shuffling because MVL had 8 minutes and Levon had like 30 seconds. So Levon's just shuffling to try to figure something out. And again, I told you this game was 115 moves until Levon in this position allowed the move king f5, which already is like, wait a second. Wait. By the way, just so you understand, first of all, this is check, but the bishop in many of these cases cannot take this pawn because the bishop is monitoring the movement of the a pawn, right? Bishop is monitoring. But the king is a different story. The king is a different story. And after king c3, there is just king takes f4, and all of a sudden Levon's down 2 pawns versus 1. Whoa, whoa, whoa. I mean, Levon's up 2 pawns versus 1, but he's down to 2 pawns. He had 3 pawns. So he's still trying to win, but it's pretty hard. This is not an easy position to win. MVL he's got a new breath of life. He's shuffling back and forth. Knight b7. Knight b7, the point of this is to push the a pawn potentially. Bishop b6, a5, bishop a7. Okay, but this is wrong. In this position, MVL should not have allowed the pawn to go to a5. Actually, the best thing for him to do was to get closer with the king, and here's why. If you play a5 here, just trying to push all the way through, the bishop's apparently best defense is on b8. Why is it on b8? If the bishop defends on b8, this pawn will never get through unless this knight makes it to b5, and how is that going to happen? How is the knight going to get to b5? I mean, it can go to d6, for example, a6, right, to try to go here and here. But let's say there. You can't, that's not going to work. I take you with check. The more pawns you lose, right, the closer this is going to get to a draw. And if you play knight to c5, then I can push my pawn. And if you take it, I'm going to take. And I'm going to draw this game. So MVL just tried to plant his bishop a little bit too early. And in the endgame, that's all it takes. It takes one move. And all of a sudden, knight d6. And if you try this idea now, knight b5 holds everything. And that's exactly what happened in the game. We got knight d6, knight b5 is coming. You're going to force the bishop to b8 and a6, a7. MVL should have stayed patient. But he plays e5, d5 now, e4, and, well, Levon finds the winning move. Maybe MVL missed this. The point is that the knight can actually just take the pawn. Say, wait, what? What about king takes? That's the danger of having passed pawns in endgames. d6. Discovered check. And the pawn is just promoting. You cannot stop the pawn. You can chase it down, but you cannot go to b6, right? And that's why the bishop was also needed here, because the bishop could have monitored both pawns. On a7, the bishop is stuck. It cannot stop the pawn. You can give a check, doesn't matter. I don't know, king b4, king d3, king c2, king, any move. King d2, for example, and the pawn is still going to promote, and, well. But there is one final phase of this game before you go. The final phase of this game is the fact that it became knight and bishop versus king. Do any of you know how to win this? Levon does. This is something that I learned only when I was like 2000, 2100, but I will just show it to you. Those of you that stuck around, you get a little bonus lesson. If you have a knight and a bishop, you cannot checkmate the king in the color corner that is not equal to your bishop. So you need to move the bishop. Move the king, move the enemy king to a corner with the right color of your bishop. That's step one. The defending side wants to run to the wrong corner, and there is a technique called the W technique to get the king out of that corner and to the right corner. Of course, there is also a technique to box the king, as you will see. Bishop d5, king c5, just basically forcing the king to the final row. King f5, king d4, getting a little bit closer. King f4, now we have a moment, we're going to bring the knight. The king goes back to where it was, we bring the knight in front of the king, and then bishop to e4. What does this do? This forces the king to decide if it's going 2 rows now away, or sticking 3. So he goes here, knight c4, of course you go back. Well, now here, we take away this square, king d5. King again has to go there, 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 or there. And all of those things are 2 away from the final row. So the king decides to go here, bishop f5, a little closer. King comes back, king defends. You're going to use your pieces as a barrier for your opponent's king. King goes back to e7. Now take away these squares, king e5. King to f7. Now we jump in with the knight. King to g7, king to e6. And now the king has landed on the final row. Actually, didn't really have a choice. The king would have ended up on the back row no matter what. King to g8, king to f6, king in the wrong corner. And this is how you extract it. You play knight f7 check, or any check. King slides, and now a concept in endgames known as wasting a move. What does that mean? You want it to be black's move again, but it's your move. So what do? Bishop g6 or bishop b1, all the same. The point is that now black has to go here, and now you play this move. And now the king has no way to get back to the wrong corner, and in this position you employ a technique with the knight. Why it's called the W technique, because this is oftentimes what it looks like, or it looks like this, right? Knight f7, knight e5, knight d7, knight c5. It kind of looks like a double, or I mean, it kind of looks like an M, depending on which side of the board you're looking at it for. And this is how you do it. The knight goes to e5. The point is that you take away this square. King continues to run. You bring your king. King c7, trying to get out. Knight d7. Here MVL actually resigns. So first we are going to congratulate Levon Aronian for winning, for qualifying to the final, and eliminating MVL. Okay? Big congratulations to him. And last, I will show you how to win this position, right? So knight d7, if the king continues to run, this is the hardest technique to learn. In this position, when you are transferring the king from the opposite corner to the right corner, there is this getaway. But you just bring your bishop back, and the box is built. And it's hard to visualize this, but every single getaway square for the enemy king is occupied. The king is now in a barrier, has to go back, and you take away this square from the king as well. You can play bishop e4, for example, and now all of these squares are occupied, so the king has to go back, and now you go here, and the process continues. If the king continues to try to get out, give a check. Remember that concept of wasting a move? We could do it here, but we also can continue the W, right? Knight to c5, king will go to c8, and in positions like this, there are various ways to just walk the king the right way over. So for example, if you want to waste the move in this position, you can play bishop f7, right? King c8, and knight c5. Now, you can also complete your W. Knight b7 check. King here, slide over. King here, slide over. Because the second the king tries to get away, we have a check. King to b8. And okay, now we have like a lot of different ways to coordinate our pieces to give a checkmate. We can go knight to c5, we can go bishop to f5. The point is, for example, look, knight c5, king has to go to the right corner. This is why it's the right corner. I want you to get this position with the king here, but a knight here and a bishop here. So I want it to be check. I want it, how do we pass the turn back to our opponent? Waste the move. Like that. Huh? King b8. Check. Here. Mate. Boom! You did it. You now know how to checkmate with bishop and knight. And you also now know who the two finalists are in the Airthings Masters. Congratulations to Timur Rajabov and Levon Aronian, and boy does this set up a crazy matchup. Again, I will reiterate this point. Both of them, one is from Armenia, one is from Azerbaijan, both very, very, very proud of their countries, both very vocal about the recent conflict in the countries. Timur saying that, you know, the region belongs to Azerbaijan. Levon saying he would sign up for the army if he had to defend his country. They have not, I don't think, spoken to each other. They have not been included on an interview since all of this has been happening. This will make up for an epic final match. Stay tuned.